Hark and well met, folks, and welcome back to another archaeology brunch stream. My name is RuneMeisterKris, and today on this fine Sunday midday, I have a couple things that I want to do. I hope that you all have your coffees and your foods. I was inspired last night by the archaeology fun fact that came up regarding that Norwegian site that has melting ice that is revealing archaeological discoveries, right? It's something that I am loosely following, but I would like to learn a little bit more about. So today we are going to discuss that subject, the idea of how weather and climate is impacting archaeological study. I have a couple examples that I want to pull up from the British Isles, and then we'll talk a little bit about that Scandinavian site. Now, for the brunch part of the stream, today I am eating leftover General Tso's chicken with some eggs and bacon on top. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into the video. Before we get started, I'm gonna have to do that mandatory subscribe plug. So if you could go ahead and hit the button, it would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit of support helps the channel grow and allows me to make more top quality content. And that's what we're here for, isn't it? So subscribe. So, folks, let's get into it. This is an article that just came out, and which I posted in Discord, but which I wanted to actually start looking through and kind of discuss because the idea and the concept ties directly into what we're going to be talking about. As many of my European viewers will know, and maybe less of my American viewers, Europe is under one of the most unprecedented droughts that the entire continent has seen, right? It's really terrible. But there is something that is coming out of this, which is a little bit of a weird circumstance. Certain areas are revealing archaeological content that was not present or not visible and able to be studied in traditional ways as a result of there being water there. Now, in this case, we have a Welsh village that was submerged in a reservoir in the 19th century, so the 1800s. And now, because of this droughting, the village is now being brought back out. And it says here that remnants of the village were last visible during a drought in 1976. But all of these temperatures in the UK make this site, which is at Lake Vyrnwy, that's like one of the more tame Welsh names. I can't butcher Vyrnwy when they have stuff like 10 million vowels, you know, all in a row. Yeah, so this site is being revealed as a result of that, which, like you said, is pretty cool. It just has like a bit of a weird situation to it. Now, with this, another less cool example of how weather is affecting archaeological sites, particularly in Britain, is at this site of Skara Brae in the Orkney Isles on the north side of Scotland. Skara Brae is a Neolithic site, right? So Stone Age site, potentially even older than Stonehenge or the pyramids of Giza. This is a very, very, very old site. Skara Brae is gorgeous. This is like, it's a very cool site, and I wanted to pull this one up specifically because it is like a digital model of Skara Brae, and we were talking about digital models earlier on one of our other brunch streams. Because look at this. This is a 3D model that I can control now of this area, right? So you can see Skara Brae is coastal, right? It sits right on the water, and we have the shale and the slate and everything. Everything is being eroded away. And as sea levels are rising, Skara Brae is being slowly chiseled away into the ocean. And yeah, I mean, the stuff that's at this site are incredible, like subsurface stone houses, right? It's an amazing settlement. Very cool. A 10 out of 10 would live here. Looking at these different housing structures and everything, obviously all of them are subterranean. A lot of this stuff is already kind of eroding away from the top surface. It's very cool. So this is the inside of House 7 at Skara Brae. It was one of the bigger ones. And you can see they had like a dresser sort of thing over here. Down here they've got these like watertight little storage carvings in here, stone carvings. we are seeing magnificent sites that can tell us a tremendous amount of deal about Neolithic Britain, with the potential of getting washed away into the ocean. So here. Scarabray on a map. Scarabray Prehistoric Village is right here in the Bay of Scale, which is right there in relative to the United Kingdom. That's kind of the situation that's happening over there. Whereas with the first site, this drought and weather change is revealing new archaeology. There are many, many sites that are also being negatively affected by this stuff. Here's where we're getting fancy. We're reading a newspaper. We're reading an online newspaper. These are all, the results of climate change that's obviously threatening different parts of Scotland and the British Isles, iconic sites. In the past, the coastline could create a defensible position, making for a strong place to build a fortress. A lot of sites are built on coastlines. And there are some Viking sites, or early Viking settlement sites in Britain that are also facing some of these problems. Some of which, have half of their buildings collapsed into the water already. Some of which may have completely disappeared, and we just never found them. All of these things are a result of this climate change. Now, the same sort of thing, we're going to jump over, the same sort of thing is happening over in Norway. This era was the one that I was specifically talking about last night when we had our archaeology fun fact. I was talking about glacial ice melts revealing certain artifacts and elements of the Viking Age that are being unearthed by this climate change. So this one here is an arrow. Pretty, intact. The only thing missing are the feathers. And this all takes place in a place badassly called the Jotunheimen mountain range. Yes, that Jotunheim. The base camp is about 1750 meters above sea level, so it's pretty high up there. This arrow specifically is not a Viking Age artifact. It's 1500 years ago, during Norway's Iron Age, right? So one of those pre-Viking, proto-Germanic cultures that that have come up a couple times recently. The team believes that the arrow was lost and deposited downslope by meltwater, and has since been exposed several times over the centuries with the melting ice. This arrow is one of multiple. The team found another arrow earlier this year in the same area, the Jotunheimen Mountains, which dates from around 1700 years ago, older. This arrow was found complete with its iron arrowhead, sinew wrappings, and aerodynamic feather fletching. So this was a near intact arrow, which is great because obviously that doesn't happen all the time. 1700 years ago, you're gonna get those biological materials kind of dissolving away, or the feathers wouldn't really be there. The wood wouldn't certainly be in the state that it is. It's an incredible preserved artifact that's coming about as a result of this melting global warming. Slightly related, but you had this shower thought the other night. What if Otzi was the murderer and he was escaping? The mystery continues. I feel like everyone knows Otzi, right? I feel like everyone knows Otzi, a wet mummy. He was down in Austria and Italy in the Alps. Otzi is, I think, one of the more famous examples of this sort of stuff that's happening. It's kind of one of those instances of glacial melt and discovery of things up in those contexts that are telling us just an incredible amount. He had the copper axe. People thought he might have known how to smelt. Then wouldn't his killers take something so valuable? So what if he was the thief and murderer and not a smith as we thought? We literally will never know. But it is fun to think about. I always thought that what they said was that it took him a while to die of his injuries. It's not that somebody killed him and took his stuff and then ran. It was that he was something happened, he got attacked. Yeah, he slowly bled out. And so I thought that the idea was that he was escaping into the mountains and then he died up there and then they never found him. You really like Emily's theory that he's the murderer? Listen, guys, this is some Otzi slander in my chat right now. Otzi is an international treasure. Let's leave him out of this. We're here to talk about glaciers. This arrow coming out of the melting ice is part of the broader Secrets of the Ice kind of concept and project. This is just kind of the idea of glacier archaeologists whose very specific sub-area is to study glacial melts and things that were used and found in glacial areas. They have some other really cool finds that have come about as a result of this as well. The best preserved pair of skis from prehistory. A lot of people, I think, might consider skiing to be kind of like a more modern thing, as like, oh yeah, you know, you go skiing and it's a lot of fun. Skis were a legitimate tool, much like snowshoes and stuff, which were used to traverse rough terrain, rough, snowy, icy terrain. So here from the Dingervarden ice patch in Norway, we are dealing with a pre-Viking era ski, which sits about 1,300 years old. The Viking Age for us ended about 800 years ago. These glacial archaeologists, they have a ton of really crazy things that they do. It's an insane subgenre of archaeology. Much like underwater archaeology, it's very niche. It has its own unique sets of dangers and problems and things that you need to do that other archaeologists don't have to deal with. You know, they bring their doggo, they bring ice axes, they have, you know, personal shovels, just kind of all of these unique things. Cups of hot water. Sorry, lukewarm water. But yeah, and then you get the result of these. Skis made like completely free of ice. These results are things that wouldn't have happened if they weren't having a bit of like these melting events in the glaciers, you know? I mean, granted, they had to dig through ice and stuff to find it, but chances are there was something that happened up here that signaled them to come in. And so coming in and finding these things, that's telling us a brand, like, you know, new discoveries. But it comes at the cost of warming climates, melting glaciers, and all of the associated troubles that you would find in that. These discoveries and everything are coming about as a result of climate change, which, for good, like in the case here, or bad in the case of Skara Brae dissolving into the ocean, that's kind of the give and take that comes about with it. I think that as technology expanded and as we moved further into the future in terms of our abilities to discover, our abilities to do things, I think that we would have an easier time, say, if all of this climate change was not happening. You know? Underwater archaeology is very much a thing. They could have found this Welsh village, Llanwydden. No idea if that's right. I don't speak Welsh. This is something that would have been discovered, or, well, rather it was discovered. They knew it was there. But it could have been studied using underwater archaeological techniques, which already exist. Of course, now they can use more traditional land-based methods, but the question, I guess, kind of comes down to, is that necessary to finding out everything that you need about the site? One of the key things of archaeology, particularly in modern ages here, is very much like the rule of camping, leave no trace. It's kind of like we want to get the most information that we can out of a site with the minimum amount of impact to the site. We want to mitigate the damage done to the area, particularly in big settlement sites like this. If it's a small site that's just, it's got that prehistoric arrow wedged in a rock, you're going to want to get that out without doing as much damage as possible, keep all of the data and everything, but everything else around it, this seems like an isolated arrow, so it's not going to be important to keep it within its context right up against these rocks, you know, especially because it was likely displaced by glacial water melt. But when you're dealing with more big settlement sites like this, like Skara Brae, we're going to want to keep everything intact in its place the way that it was when it was built, because that is going to tell us the most that we can about the people that were there. See the Terracotta Soldiers and Pompeii. Yes, the Terracotta Soldiers, I believe, they've just straight up stopped doing anything with them. They're like, we got enough. And the ones that they have, because they noticed that, like, apparently when they unearthed the chamber with them, they all had these amazing, like, colors and details to them. And, like, the second they opened the chamber, they all went to hell. It was like, they said, like, visually they could watch the decay happening on them. Especially in instances like that, there may come a time in the future where technology has advanced to the point where we can study those sorts of things. We're kind of at the point now where we have all of these terracotta warriors, we have all of these amazing artifacts, and as technology is getting better, we're going to be able to do more towards preserving, restoring, and keeping these sites and artifacts and things intact in a way that will allow us to learn more about them. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, with taking an archaeological site or taking archaeological artifacts and saying, there is something that needs to be done with this, and as much as I would love to be the person who does it, I can settle for being the person who found it. And being able to put it down and say, I do not have the tools necessary to do this job properly. but someone in 10 years might. And maybe I'll chip in then. And so being able to take something and put it aside and say, my job right now, my job, I have found this. It is my job to keep it intact, safe. That's what a lot of people are doing at Skara Brae. They are putting up these kind of manual brick walls to keep the site intact, while continuing technology such as this 3D render, which now allows us to keep this 2021 view of the site intact for, as long as there's digital media. That's, I think, pretty amazing, being able to take this and look at it and go, you know what, that's good enough. That's all I can do. And there's a ton that they can find out about this place using the technology that we have today. There's so many things that we can still learn, but just being able to acknowledge it and say, I don't have everything that I need right now, I think is something that is very important to the field of archaeology. A lot of these glacier studies, a lot of these glacial archaeology discoveries are coming about as a means of new and advancing technology. Like we said, the work that's happening with the Terracotta Warriors or any other things are a lot of them are the result of advancing technologies. This is kind of what my whole archaeological focus and all the stuff that I've been doing when I talk to you guys about archaeology on stream has kind of been pushing for. The technological advances and the utilizations of new technology with archaeology. A lot of places use old tech because it's cheap and because archaeology doesn't get a lot of really good funding. But if we can start to, as a business, as a profession, advance our usage of drones, 3D models and renders, advanced preservation techniques, because at the end of the day, that's what we are. We are cultural resource preservationists. We have a ticking timer in a lot of instances. Climate change, these sorts of things are eroding away sites. It's active, it's visible, we can see the change happening in real time. So we see this timer ticking, right? And our job is, we can do some cases we need like a rush job where we need to be able to say, we got to get this done now. And other times we can sit back and say, you know what, let's take a minute. Let's think about this. Let's put this on the back burner, learn as much as we can about it with what we've got, non-destructively, and figure it out in the future. What I'm pretty proud about is that this site of Skara Brae, they were able to put in the seawall in the late 1920s. They had the foresight that early on that they were like, ooh, something's got to be done here. We are very close to that water. And so as things have advanced, it's obviously been refortified many times, necessarily. I love that they did this. So they took their scan, extended it beyond just the realm of Skara Brae itself, right? So you have Skara Brae, this is the village site right here. You can see it's fenced in, they know what they're doing. They took scans further down, not just of the approach, but of the unprotected coastline down here, to show the correlation of this is what it should be like over here. And give or take the flow of the coastline here, you could see it kind of gradually curves this way. This would have gradually curved this way, but we still would have lost probably the entirety of this house if it weren't for those protection efforts that are happening. An unusual level of foresight from people in the 1920s. A people historically known for their ability to look forward. I don't remember exactly when this happened. However, I know it was a long time ago. When I was working at A-tier site, Cahokia Mounds, the work that I was doing was rescue archaeology related to a particular area of the site that had been dug up in those early times, where somebody took a bulldozer and drove it 15 feet into the ground and dug up all of the pretty things to take and give to a museum, which taught them a lot, but not nearly as much as if you had just done it systematically, level by level, using scientific archaeological methods, other than just dig deep. I think that computer science, digital imaging, this sort of technology here, is something that every other science can find a use for. Do I think there should be more active utilization? Maybe. We are heading towards a cyborg society. I think that the ongoing and continuing use of digital media is going to be very important for the preservation of historic artifacts and other elements of science moving forward. The Brits are more blasé about using heavy machinery to excavate. Yeah, well, first of all, the bulldozer was not in Britain, although I did have an excavator used on a British site once. They had an actual excavator using it to like pull through turf and stuff, like pull turf layers off the top, or in some cases explosives. Let's not talk about him. Honestly, like Heinrich Schliemann gets a lot of crap, and he did a whole lot for the study of Greek archaeology, the discovery, quote unquote, of the potential city of Troy. However, yes, I do not agree with his liberal use of TNT. I don't know if that was exactly the most scientific way of going about preserving history. Again, what we're talking about. And what's crazy to me to think about, oh my gosh, what's crazy to me to think about, because we were talking about this, where we said, oh, you know, we want to be able to use what we have with modern technology to do as much work as we can, but understand that there's going to be better technology in the future that will do the job better. Heinrich Schliemann is like, I need to use the best technology that I have available to me in today's age to get all of this information. I'm going to blow it sky high with as much TNT as I can. And now we're looking at him like, you absolute moron. I can't believe that this was the norm back then. And now, you know, and then similarly with the guy at Cahokia, he dug a bulldozer into the ground to try and get as much archaeology out as he could. And he said, this is a great method. I can get so much artifacts doing this. What was his budget at the time? The dude was 1%er. He was like a famed rich businessman out of Germany. So his budget was however big his dad's wallet was. It was as much the fame as it was the discovery. He had an academic interest in these areas, yes. However, at the end of the day, he wanted a cool story to tell around at the Rich People Club, in my opinion. I will not stand Otzi slander in chat, but I will stand Heinrich Schliemann slander. Schliemann slander. Just schlander. What again I'm tying back to here is the fact that he was using technology that he thought was good and very helpful at the time. The researcher at Cahokia was using bulldozers, what he thought was good at the time. And we are using methods that we think are good at our time. And while ours are significantly better than those who came before us, that doesn't mean that they are the best. I don't know if there ever really will be a best. But the stuff that we're using today, a lot of times does still have a little bit of a destructive element of it. My subscription notification is literally a guy putting a pickaxe through a skull's head. It's those things where we are doing the best that we can with the tools that we have, but we need to understand that there's going to be better ways to do it in the future. And we kind of need to figure out where to cut our losses and where to invest more. And the issue with that is we don't always know if cutting our losses in a place and saying, well, this is just a small site, or, oh, this is just one or two pieces of artifacts, whether or not that is going to not be the case, and if we find out more information about it farther in the future. So anyway, guys, I think that was a really great discussion talking about the effects of weather on archaeology, the changes in how it's affecting things, and where technology is advancing to a point of us being able to use it in certain circumstances, right? We're finding discoveries coming out of melting glacier ice, which is really cool. We're finding villages that are coming up in reservoirs and underwater elements as a result of droughts. And then we're also potentially losing sites to the effects of weather, such as the coastlines at Skarabrae. So there's a lot of give and take here, and I think that it is a net negative, right? I think that although we are finding really cool sites, and although we are learning really cool things about archaeology as a result of these massive climate changes and shifts and coastline damages and droughts and all of this stuff, I think that the negative effects of those weather events are more significant than the positives that we're finding out about these things. Namely because the technology might exist in the future to study and research these sites without needing to have the weather make a significant change. The land within, it was intact. It was perfectly fine. It was underwater. It was chill. Vibing, living its best life. We could have researched it, conducted archaeological methods using underwater archaeology techniques. They exist. They're getting better every year. So I don't think that having a drought reveal it and pop it out does anything to help the field of archaeology. Except, you know, like I said, it offers a couple of other methods of excavation, which I don't know if they would tell us any more or less than it would if we were using just underwater methods. The glacial finds, there might have been a circumstance in the future where we could use ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR imagery, and other elements to look through the top levels of snow and ice to see the artifacts and the sites that sit beneath them. We're already doing that in certain other parts of the world, certain other places. Like, yes, this is a lot more practical. Being able to go out and say, oh, I see these artifacts are out here. We can excavate them. We can study them. We can do these sorts of things. That is great. But you can still do that. You just have to dig through a couple extra layers of ice and snow. They still could have come out and excavated these things through a little extra snow and ice, but they would have been able to discover it using alternative technological methods rather than analog, oh, look, there's a bit sticking out of the snow there, let's go get it. And no, I'm sure that they are using a lot of technologies. I don't want to sound reductive in terms of how they're doing their archaeology, because the glacial archaeology work, the teams that are working up there, are doing incredible science. But I think that if the glaciers were being preserved and were kind of holding in the pattern that they were in, we would still be able to learn a lot from those areas. We would just have to use different methods and means. So, guys, yeah, that's it for the archaeology portion of the brunch stream today. I'm still eating my brunch. I know I said I wasn't going to take the whole hour, but I ended up doing it, which is not a bad thing. It just means more editing by me when I turn it into a video and upload it to my YouTube.
Never works this way.